She sang by the river, and a mermaid followed her home. Hours later, this happened. The song came from Zainabu, a quiet village girl whose voice carried pain, hope, and longing. Every evening, she stood by the sacred river, singing melodies her grandmother taught her, songs said to calm spirits and awaken ancient memories. That evening, the river listened differently. The water trembled. The wind stilled. And beneath the surface, something heard her. As Zainabu sang, ripples formed behind her. She never noticed the shimmering eyes watching from the depths, nor the scaled hand brushing reeds aside. When she turned to leave, the river returned to silence, but it was no longer empty. By nightfall, strange things began to happen in her compound. Water seeped from the ground. Fish appeared where there was no stream, and outside her hut, footprints, half human, half fin, led to her door. Zainabu would soon learn that her voice had awakened a mermaid bound by an ancient river pact, a spirit who followed singers with forbidden songs. The visit was not by chance. It was a summons, and before dawn, a choice would be demanded, one that could bring blessing to the village or unleash a curse older than the river itself. If you are new here, hit the subscribe button and tell me where you are watching from as we begin this interesting story. Now, let's begin. The ache in Zainabu's throat was a familiar companion by the time the last note of the binder's lament faded into the twilight. It was a raw, physical echo of the loneliness that sat heavy in her chest, a stone that no amount of village laughter or communal chores could dislodge. Here, at the bend of the river Alokun, where the silk cotton trees leaned over the water like protective elders, she was not the orphaned girl, the awkward leftover in her aunt's busy compound. Here, she was simply a voice connecting with a memory. The red earth of the bank was cool beneath her bare feet, and the air smelled of wet clay and blooming water lilies. To the people of Uzuma village, especially to Chief Dyke with his plans for a new grinding mill and his speeches about moving beyond bush talk, the Alokun was just a water source, a thing to be harnessed. But to Zainabu, raised on her grandmother's whispered stories, the river was a living, breathing entity, a coiled, dreaming god with watery veins stretching deep into the world's heart. Her grandmother, Neoma, had been the last true priestess, a woman who could read the river's moods in the swirl of eddies and the color of the silt. She had taught Zainabu the old songs, not as pretty melodies, but as tools, as conversations. "This one thanks the water for the fish," she'd say, her voice like dry leaves. "This one asks for gentle rains, and this one," she'd whisper, her milky eyes growing distant, "this one is the binder's lament. It is a song of great loneliness. It is sung not to ask, but to find. It is a key for a lock most hope remains forgotten. Sing it only when your spirit is at its lowest ebb, child, for it calls to things that are also lost." Zainabu had never understood the warning, only that the somber, winding tune mirrored the hollow places inside her. She sang it every evening, a private prayer for a connection she could not name. Tonight, the river's response was not its usual gentle lap against the shore. As her final note hung in the humid air, a sudden, deep tremor passed through the water, a shudder that made the reflection of the rising moon shatter into 1,000 shards of light. The chorus of frogs and crickets cut off abruptly, leaving a silence so profound Zainabu could hear the rush of blood in her own ears. The wind died, and the hanging vines by the bank went perfectly still. A primal fear, cold and sharp, traced its finger down her spine. This was not the peaceful Alokun she knew. This was the river from Neoma's older, darker tales, the one that could listen with intent. She hugged her wrapper tighter around her thin frame, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the ripples then, not spreading from the center, but converging towards the bank just a few paces downstream from where she stood. Something was moving against the current, something large. She caught a glimpse of a shimmer, not a fish's scales, but a wider, more intelligent flash, like polished obsidian catching moonlight. A pair of eyes, wide-set and unblinking, broke the surface for a fleeting second before vanishing beneath a patch of floating hyacinth. Zainabu froze, her breath caught in her throat. She saw a hand, or something like a hand, rise from the reeds. It was slender, webbed between long fingers that ended not in nails, but in delicate, pointed tips like mother-of-pearl. It brushed aside a curtain of hanging moss with an eerie, graceful deliberation, as if clearing a stage. Terror and a dizzying fascination warred within her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee back to the smoky safety of cooking fires and human voices. But her feet, rooted to the sacred earth, would not obey. This was what her songs were for. This was the listening. The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the presence receded. The water smoothed. The night insects cautiously resumed their symphony. The ordinary world rushed back in, but it was now a veil over something utterly extraordinary. Shaking, Zainabu turned and forced her legs to carry her up the worn path to the village. She did not look back. If she had, she might have seen the water where the eyes had been gently bubbling, as if in quiet celebration. The strange occurrences began before she even reached her aunt's compound on the outskirts of Uzuma. A patch of dusty ground by the footpath was suddenly dark and sodden, though it had not rained for days. A small, silvery tilapia, its gills flapping feebly, lay in the center of the dampness, far from any stream. Zainabu stared at it, her mind struggling to reconcile the impossibility. She hurried on, the sense of being watched clinging to her like the river's mist. Her home was a collection of 3 mud brick huts with rusting corrugated iron roofs, encircled by a low fence of woven palm fronds. Her aunt, Ifoma, a pragmatic woman worn thin by work and worry, was already lighting the kerosene lamp inside the main hut. "You're late, girl," she called out, her voice not unkind, but tired. "The fire is almost out. Come and help with the beans." But Zainabu stopped dead at the entrance to her own small sleeping hut. There, in the soft, moonlit dust leading right up to her raffia door, was a trail of footprints. They were the size of her own, but the impressions were all wrong. The ball of the foot was deeply defined, but the heel was barely a mark, as if the walker had been on their toes. And between each print, a faint, sweeping groove connected them, like the drag of a heavy, flexible tail. The prints were damp, leaving dark stains on the pale earth. Her gaze followed them backwards, tracing their path from the direction of the river, through the broken section of the fence, straight to her threshold. The message was undeniable, intimate, and terrifying. She had been followed. Swallowing a cry, she quickly scuffed out the evidence with her foot before her aunt or cousins could see. Inside her hut, the air felt thick and cool, smelling oddly of deep water and wet stone, a scent that did not belong. She lit her own small palm oil lamp with trembling hands. The yellow flame revealed nothing out of place. Her sleeping mat neatly rolled, her few clothes stacked on a stool, her grandmother's carved wooden comb beside a small, cracked mirror. Yet the feeling of another presence was suffocating. She sat on the mat, drawing her knees to her chest, trying to calm the frantic rhythm of her heart. What had she done? What had her song summoned? Sleep was impossible. The night was punctuated by small, wet sounds, a drip from the roof where there was no leak, a soft splash from the empty water pot in the corner. Just before the deepest part of the night, when the darkness felt like a weight, she heard it. A voice, not in her ears, but in the very center of her mind. It was a melody woven from the sound of rushing currents and the hollow whisper of reeds, and underneath it, words formed with the clarity of a bell. "Singer of the lament, finder of the lost, you have turned the key." Zainabu shot upright, her blood running cold. "Who is there?" she whispered into the thick dark. "Come," the water voice replied. It was neither male nor female, but ancient and powerful. "To the place of the humming stones, where the river remembers. Come at the false dawn when the moon and sun share the sky. Come alone." Then, as if to underscore the command, a new phenomenon began. From the packed earth floor of her hut, right in the center, a dark patch spread. Water, clear and cold, began to seep upwards, welling from the ground itself to form a small, perfectly still pool no wider than her hand. In it, the lamplight flickered, and for an instant, Zainabu saw a reflection that was not her own. A serene, beautiful face with those same wide, luminous eyes, framed by hair that moved like drifting weed. The vision vanished. The water stopped seeping, leaving only a damp circle. The mental voice was gone. The choice presented in the hook was no longer an abstract future possibility. It was a demand hanging in the air of her tiny hut. A spirit, bound by an ancient pact, had been awakened by her loneliness. It had followed her song home, and now it was summoning her to a meeting that would decide everything, blessing or curse. The fate of her village and her own destiny now rested on the shoulders of a girl who had only ever wanted to feel connected. The false dawn was only a few hours away. Gathering every shred of courage she inherited from Neoma, Zainabu knew she would go to the humming stones. There was no other path. The damp circle on her hut floor had dried by first light, leaving only a faint, salt-tinged stain as proof the night had not been a fevered dream. Zainabu moved through her morning chores in a daze, her mind a roaring river of its own, drowning out her aunt's instructions and the chatter of her cousins. The weight of the summoned meeting pressed on her, a stone in her belly. She needed guidance, a thread of truth to follow into the coming darkness. The village, however, was already spinning its own tales. By mid-morning, the strange signs could no longer be ignored. Fishermen returning from the Alokun came with boats nearly empty, their faces grim. In the few nets that held catch, the fish were bloated and stiff, their scales dull, their eyes milky, a harvest of death, not food. They were dumped on the riverbank, a silvery, stinking accusation. Children, wide-eyed and whispering, clustered near the water's edge, daring each other to look for the shiny woman with no legs they swore they'd seen at daybreak. The air in Uzuma, usually thick with the smells of wood smoke and frying plantains, now carried the sour tang of fear and decay. Chief Dyke called a village meeting under the great Iroko tree in the square. He stood, a solid, imposing figure in his machine-stitched agbada, his face a mask of stern pragmatism. Zainabu hovered at the back, her wrapper pulled tight, trying to make herself invisible. "People of Uzuma," the chief's voice boomed, silencing the nervous murmur. "We see these disturbances, dead fish, foolish stories. Let us not fill our hearts with the darkness of our grandparents. This is not the work of spirits. This is the work of nature, a bad season, a turned current. Or perhaps," he paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd and seeming to linger for a cold moment on Zainabu, "it is the work of idle minds and backward songs that stir up mud from the river bottom. We are a modern village. We have a grinding mill coming. We do not bow to river demons. We conquer the water for our use." A ripple of uneasy agreement went through some of the younger men, those who saw Dyke's vision of progress. But the elders, like Mama Enkechai, remained silent, their eyes clouded with knowing worry. The chief's warning was clear. Let no one be found feeding these old fears with whispers or songs. Such actions divide us. They attract bad luck, and we will not tolerate what weakens Uzuma. The threat of ostracization hung unspoken but potent in the air. Zainabu felt it like a physical shove. She slipped away before the meeting fully dissolved, her heart pounding not just with fear now, but with a simmering anger. He was calling her grandmother's wisdom backward songs. He was blaming the river's sickness on those who still remembered its true name. She found Mama Enkechai in the dim, herbal-scented coolness of her hut, the oldest dwelling in the village. The old woman was grinding nuts with a stone pestle, her movements slow and deliberate. She did not look up as Zainabu entered. "The river is angry, child," Mama Enkechai said, her voice a dry rustle. "And a cornered animal, even a chief, will bite." "Mama, I need to know," Zainabu whispered, kneeling before her. "Last night, something heard my song. It spoke to me. It wants me to come to the humming stones. What is the binder's lament truly for? What pact did my grandmother keep?" Mama Enkechai set the pestle down. Her eyes, when she lifted them, were full of a profound sorrow. "Your grandmother, Neoma, was my sister in spirit. She carried a burden Dyke's family laid upon her. The covenant of Alokun was not just poetry. It was a hard bargain for survival. Generations ago, when famine chased our people, the river's spirits saved us. In return, we offered a bond. A chosen girl, a river bride, would be trained as priestess to speak for us to keep the balance. She would live between worlds. Her first child would be pledged to the water's service, ensuring the line." She reached out a gnarled hand and took Zainabu's, her grip surprisingly strong. Chief Dyke's grandfather broke the chain. His daughter, Dyke's own mother, was chosen. He could not bear it. He learned a twisted version of the binder's lament from a jealous wanderer. It was a song not to communicate, but to trap. He lured the then guardian, a spirit of great nobility, and with false words and stolen magic, he bound him into a prison of water and glass, casting him into the river's deepest sleep. He told the village the spirit had turned malicious, that the droughts that followed were its curse, not the result of its absence. Zainabu's breath caught. The bottle, the man inside, the guardian, is the one you have woken, Mama Enkechai finished, her voice grave. Your song, sung with a true lonely heart, was the real key. You have undone a great wrong, child. But in doing so, you have awoken a power that has been starving for justice for 100 years. The river is sick because its heart was stolen. The choice you face, Neoma knew it might come. She said the song would find the right blood when the village was ready to hear the truth again or be destroyed by its lie. The pieces crashed together in Zainabu's mind, forming a picture far more terrifying and complex than she had imagined. This was not a simple ghost story. It was a history of betrayal, a crime hidden by the chief's family, a debt owed by the entire village. Her choice was not just personal, it was judicial. She was the accidental judge of a century-old crime. As dusk approached, heavy with unshed rain, Zainabu returned to the river not to sing, but to think. She stood far from the village at a lonely stretch where giant, water-smoothed stones hummed when the current ran high. This was the place. She felt a presence before she saw it. The water near the bank parted, and Alosa emerged. She was breathtaking and fearsome, her upper torso like that of the most beautiful woman, her skin gleaming with a pattern of fine, iridescent scales, her hair a living mass of dark, flowing tendrils. Her lower body was pure power, the muscular, sinuous form of a great fish, its fins like tattered silk. "You know the truth now, singer," Alosa said, her voice the sound of a waterfall heard from a distance. "My brother Mamiwata awaits his fate, but the river cannot wait long. See." She gestured with a webbed hand. The water around her grew still, then became like a mirror. In it, Zainabu saw visions, Uzuma green and prosperous, children laughing by a clean river, her own older self standing at its head in priestess white, a bridge of understanding. This was the path of restoration. Then, a vision of a radiant, powerful Mami Wata ruling a thriving river, but the village in the image seemed gray, spiritually empty, its people going through motions without connection, the path of sacrifice. The final vision was of a wall of black water crushing huts, tearing trees from roots, a torrent of furious, unleashed power, the path of indecision. "The covenant is broken glass," Alosa intoned. "It must be remade or swept away. You hold the fragments. Your heart must decide how they fit together. The full moon rises. The river's patience does not." With a last, unreadable look, the mermaid sank beneath the surface, leaving Zainabu alone with the echoing hum of the stones and the impossible weight of a decision that was no longer just hers, but history. The final days before the full moon were a slow, tightening coil of tension. The river Alokun grew more temperamental by the hour. One afternoon, it ran clear and placid. The next, it was a churning, muddy brown, its banks eroding where the village's new, proudly dug irrigation channels met the water. The communal well turned not just salty, but bitter, a metallic tang that soured even the strongest palm wine. Fear curdled into panic, and panic, under Chief Dyke's desperate leadership, sought a target. The whispers against Zainabu, once just sidelong glances and muttered accusations, swelled into a chorus. She was the common denominator, the strange girl who sang to the water, whose grandmother dabbled in forbidden arts. The dead fish, the sour well, the restless river, it was her fault. She was the crack through which the old, chaotic world was seeping back in. On the eve of the full moon, the crisis broke. The river, swollen from mysterious upstream rains, leaped its banks not with a flood, but with a precise, vengeful intent. It slithered into the carefully tended plots of yam and cassava that were Chief Dyke's showcase of modern agriculture, not drowning them, but strangling them with silty, cold water before receding. The message was unmistakable. Your progress is an illusion. I can take it back. A furious, humiliated mob, led by the chief's own sons, descended on Zainabu's compound. They did not come with quiet threats now, but with shouting voices and clenched fists. "Witch! River demon! Bring your curse and leave our village." Cornered, with her Aunt Ifoma weeping in the doorway and her cousins staring in terror, Zainabu did the only thing left to her. She ran. Not into the bush, but toward the source of all the trouble, the river. The mob gave chase, their anger a hot, living thing at her back. She stumbled down the familiar path, the thorns snagging her wrapper, her breath ragged in her chest. She burst onto the bank at the place of the humming stones, the very spot of her summoning. The moon, huge and bone-white, was just clearing the trees, its light painting a shimmering road across the water's dark surface. She turned to face her pursuers, who skidded to a halt at the tree line, their fury momentarily checked by the sacredness of the place. Before Chief Dyke could shout an order, Zainabu opened her mouth. But she did not plead. She did not explain. She sang. It was not the binder's lament. It was the song Alosa had hummed at the water's edge, a song of calling, of truth, of awakening. Her voice, laced with fear, defiance, and a stunning clarity, rang out over the water. The river answered. Directly before her, the water erupted not in a splash, but in a pillar that gleamed with captured moonlight. From it stepped Mami Wata, no longer the faint, trapped figure from the bottle, but in his full, terrifying majesty. He stood atop the water, a being woven from liquid muscle and ancient power, his scaled skin shimmering with a light of its own, his amber eyes burning like submerged suns. To his right, Alosa emerged, a stern, beautiful guardian. The mob gasped, fell back, some dropping to their knees. Chief Dyke stood frozen, his face pale in the spectral light. Mami Wata's voice was the voice of the Alokun itself, deep, resonant, and utterly inescapable. It did not shout, it simply was, filling every ear and mind. He spoke of the old covenant, of the bond of mutual respect. He spoke of the betrayal, the greedy chief who stole a daughter's fate and imprisoned a guardian with a lie. He named names, recounted the secret history Mama Enkechai had told, laying the century-old crime at the feet of the present chief's lineage. The drought was my absence. The spirit thundered, and the river roiled in agreement. The sickness now is the echo of that lie. You harness a power whose heart you broke, and you blame the one who hears its weeping. The village was laid bare, its foundational sin exposed. All eyes turned from the magnificent, angry spirit to Chief Dyke, whose authority was crumbling like wet clay. He had no rebuttal, only a stunned, guilty silence. In that profound quiet, Zainabu spoke. Her voice was small after the spirit's roar, but it carried across the water with a new, unshakable authority. "I will not die for your grandfather's crime," she said, looking at Mami Wata, then at Alosa. "And I will not be chained to atone for it." She turned to her people. "But I will not abandon you or this river." She drew herself up, the girl vanishing, the bridge emerging. "I propose a new covenant, not of fear or sacrifice or blind tradition. One of choice, of respect." She laid out her terms to both worlds. She would be the priestess of Alokun, the speaker, the translator. She would learn the river's ways from the spirits and teach its needs to the village. There would be no more river brides. Her service was her own choice, a lifetime of guardianship, not a sentence passed to her children. In return, the village must honor the river truly, with festivals of thanks, with care for its banks, with offerings of song and first fruits, not out of superstition, but from gratitude. And the first act of atonement must come from the chief's house. A public apology and the restoration of the river, shrine his family had let crumble. The silence that followed was taut. Then Mami Wata and Alosa looked at each other. A current of understanding passed between them. This was not in the old laws. It was something new, forged in courage and clear sight. Mami Wata gave a slow, solemn nod. "The river recognizes strength that is not hardness, and wisdom that is not only ancient. We accept the bridge." A ceremony, spontaneous and profound, took place there at the water's edge. As the full moon reached its zenith, Zainabu waded into the shallows. Mami Wata placed a single glowing pearl, a drop of his essence, into a clay bowl of river water. Alosa, with delicate fingers, braided a strand of Zainabu's hair with a living river reed. Zainabu drank. It tasted of deep earth and endless flow. She did not transform. Instead, a profound awareness blossomed within her. She felt the river's health as her own, its currents like her own pulse. As the water settled, the bitterness fled the well. The Alokun's flow gentled, retreating to its banks, leaving behind rich, dark silt, a promise of fertility, not destruction. The village watched, humbled and awed. Chief Dyke, his pride broken, slowly knelt in the mud and poured a libation of palm wine into the water, his first act of true homage in a lifetime. The story does not end with a perfect peace, but with a new beginning. Zainabu, the song weaver, no longer sings alone at dusk. She stands by the river with the children of Uzuma, teaching them the songs of balance, the names of the water plants, the way to listen. The river and the village are learning each other's languages again, with a girl who was once an outsider now the vital, living link between them. The covenant is no longer a chain. It is a conversation, and it flows both ways. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from.